They launched it on a quiet Wednesday. One of those days where the headlines were tired, the skies were clear, and no one expected the nature of time to shift. The mission was routine on paper. A state-of-the-art optical array had been assembled in geosynchronous orbit, near the gravitational void of the Sagittarius Rift. At its center, the Einstein clock, a quantum-stabilized atomic timekeeper so precise, it could measure fluctuations smaller than a photon's delay. It wasn't just meant to track time. It was designed to detect its warping. They expected slight distortions, perhaps a subtle lag, a measurable microsecond of gravitational time dilation caused by proximity to the galactic bulge. What they got was silence, not the absence of sound, but the unsettling kind of silence that makes you feel like time itself has held its breath. 3 minutes into deployment, the Einstein clock stopped ticking. Not froze, not malfunctioned. It was still powered, still transmitting heartbeat data, still responding to system pings. But the central oscillator, its entire purpose, refused to advance. It remained fixed at 17:44:56.0091, down to the 10,000th decimal, unwavering, like a stubborn god refusing to acknowledge the next moment. At Mission Control in New Mexico, disbelief gave way to method. They ran diagnostics, rebooted signal relays, tested environmental radiation levels. Nothing was wrong, at least nothing conventional. And then, something stranger. The Einstein clock was showing the correct time for Earth, even as local atomic clocks continued to tick forward. Subtle shifts in deep space GPS synchronization showed the unsettling truth. Earth itself was slipping behind. At first, the discrepancy was imperceptible, mere nanoseconds. But over 48 hours, that lag grew. Microseconds, then milliseconds. It was as if Earth's clocks were gently, invisibly stretching like taffy under unseen pressure. A time drift, not from error, not from relativity, but from something new. The team brought in temporal physicists from Geneva, black hole theorists from Caltech. No one wanted to say it out loud, but the equations began whispering it. The Einstein array wasn't orbiting near a black hole. It was orbiting near a fracture, a wrinkle in causality, a place where time might not be a line, but a net, folded, twisted fraying. Inside the orbital lab, footage of the mission's first hour was reviewed frame by frame. It was there, between frame 12902 and 12903, that the first rupture appeared. Just a flicker, a ghosted outline of the astronaut deploying the clock, duplicated, offset by less than a meter, repeating the same gesture with a half-second delay, like an echo of time itself. He hadn't noticed it at the time. None of them had. But the camera had. A perfect double, not a glitch. The pixels were different, the lighting inconsistent. Two versions of the same man, deploying the same device. One real, one replaying an act that had just occurred, before it was supposed to. The silence returned. The mission wasn't aborted. It couldn't be. The clock was built to endure solar flares, micrometeorite punctures, even gravitational tugs from passing comets. But no one had accounted for this. And then came the dreams. 3 technicians at ground station reported identical nightmares. In them, they floated in orbit untethered, watching Earth spin faster and faster until it blurred into light. Behind them, the Einstein clock ticked in reverse, one slow beat at a time, counting down towards something they couldn't see, but could feel. When they awoke, their watches were all exactly 1 minute off. The data logs didn't show any errors, but the room's wall clock, digital, synced to global internet time, had changed to match them. A perfect synchronization. To a time no one remembered setting. Back at the lab, an intern reviewing telemetry feeds made a chilling observation. Every time the Einstein clock pulsed a heartbeat signal, every 4 seconds, it wasn't just sending time data. It was slightly altering the Earth station's internal clocks. Not a malfunction, a pull, a gravitational fingerprint from the other side of understanding. And still, the clock remained paused, holding its breath, refusing to move forward. That night, an anomaly appeared in the background radiation monitor. A narrow spike, too symmetrical, too patterned. Not noise, a signal, repeating in triplets. Some thought it was a cosmic echo. Others whispered it might be language. But no one could agree on one thing. Was the Einstein clock receiving the signal or transmitting it? The next morning, Earth's leading time observatory received a strange request from the Einstein clock itself. A ping to resynchronize. The satellite had sent a system-level request to realign Earth's time with its own, as if it were now the reference standard, as if something up there had decided that time, as we knew it, was negotiable. The scientists stared at the request for hours, afraid to deny it, afraid to accept. No one pressed the key. Instead, they turned the cameras back toward the Einstein array, focused in, tracked its orbit, looked closer at the metallic glint of the satellite, now drifting near the black horizon of the rift. And there, faint but visible, was the astronaut again, still floating, still deploying the clock. A loop, a fragment, a moment repeating itself, outside of time. The image held, frozen in frame, yet pulsing with something alive. A shape that should have faded with the orbital drift remained locked to the Einstein clock. An astronaut mid-gesture, arm extended, forever affixing the final module. No new footage was needed. Every 5 minutes, the satellite's live feed returned to that same sequence. Not a glitch. The clouds behind him shifted. The sun moved across the frame. And still, he deployed. It wasn't until frame analysis software flagged repeated anomalies that the full scope emerged. His fingers moved a few nanometers off from the last time. The tilt of his helmet adjusted slightly, as if reacting to different forces. He wasn't replaying the same footage. He was doing the same thing over and over, subtly, impossibly, with the minor drift of someone forced to relive a moment with growing awareness. On Earth, the Einstein Observatory went silent. No press releases, no briefings, just an internal memo. Observing recursion, limiting external interface. The satellite had become a sealed experiment in time reflection. A mirror turned inward, yet the mirror began to bleed outward. In observatories from Chile to Norway, telescopes calibrated to the same coordinates started registering microbursts of radiation. Identical signatures, identical timing, like a metronome tapped by a cosmic hand. Every 16 seconds a blip, then 15, then 14, as if the universe itself were counting down to something only the clock understood. And the dreams returned. This time, it was pilots, commercial airline captains, weather balloon technicians, civilian radio hobbyists, all reporting identical episodes. Floating above Earth, their shadows elongated across a cracked sky. No sun, no moon, just a singular orbiting object overhead, spinning, whispering, ticking. Back in New Mexico, the ground crew tried to isolate the source of the clock's new pings. They expected telemetry. What they received was a frequency unrecognized by any current standard. Ultrasonic, structured, repeating in short bursts. At first, they assumed compression artifacts. But it wasn't compression. It was speech, encoded not in words but in time itself. Delays, absences, pulses, gaps. Not Morse, not binary, something older, something mathematical, but almost intentional. The intervals between beats carried patterns too ordered to ignore. When converted into waveform sequences, they resembled heartbeats, an arrhythmic rhythm that somehow always returned to a central pulse. The waveform had a name now, Echo 44. Every signal since had referenced it, as if the Einstein clock had become a lighthouse, echoing a warning across space-time. And then came the blackout. For 6 minutes and 20 seconds, every satellite tuned to the Einstein array lost connection. Not scrambled, not distorted, empty, a dead interval. When connection resumed, nothing seemed wrong. The feed continued, the data streams flowed. But something had changed in the footage. The Earth in the background was wrong. The cloud formations didn't match. The coastlines shimmered as though refracted through water. One technician enlarged a frozen frame and whispered what others had feared. That's not our Earth. The orientation of the continents was off by degrees. Polar ice was in places it shouldn't be. The moon, barely visible in the top corner of the image, bore a scar across its surface that no mission had ever recorded. A new theory emerged. The Einstein clock hadn't stopped ticking. It had shifted reference frames. It was still measuring time, but not hours. At this point, the project's lead scientist, Dr. Lina Eris, broke protocol. She accessed the internal failsafe uplink, coded for emergency interference, and did the unthinkable. She sent the clock a question. No keyboard, no words, just a 3-bit signal. Are you still us? The response came not in code, but in image. The next camera burst sent down a new snapshot. Not of the satellite, not of Earth, but of a room, an observation chamber. Empty, lit with red emergency lighting. A glass window cracked from pressure, and in the center of the frame, a single object resting on a steel table, a replica of the Einstein clock. Same serial number, same scratches, same faint yellowing from solar radiation. Dr. Eris stared at the image, speechless. The lab it showed didn't exist yet. The walls bore her name in stenciled paint. But she hadn't built this room. Not yet. Not in this world. Her watch ticked once, then stopped. They checked the global clock sync. Time had advanced by 1 second, but everyone in that room remembered that second differently. Some said the lights flickered, others felt heat. A few claimed they saw the Earth's curvature reverse, as if rewinding. And Dr. Eris? She claimed nothing. She just removed her watch, set it on the desk, and walked out. She never returned. The next morning, a new image arrived. This time, the Earth looked correct, familiar, real, but in the top corner of the frame, almost missed in the blur of stars, was a second satellite. Identical in shape, identical in orbit, and slowly drifting closer. The skies above New Mexico had never looked so ordinary. And that was the problem. After days of anomalies, of mirrored astronauts and scrambled seconds, the satellite's feed stabilized. Crystal clear, perfectly framed. Too perfect, the Einstein clock now hovered against a backdrop of stars arranged just slightly wrong, as if someone had reassembled the night using a memory of it rather than the real thing. At first, analysts were relieved. They mistook the calm for a return to normalcy. Then the real pattern emerged, not in the sky, but in the clock's transmissions. Timestamps began arriving ahead of schedule. Predictions, not recordings. Each image from orbit contained Earth, not as it was, but as it would be moments later. A volcanic plume from the Pacific Ring of Fire that hadn't yet erupted. A dust storm rolling across northern Africa hours before it appeared on meteorological scans. A solar flare that hadn't yet reached our ionosphere. The feed was no longer a reflection. It had become a forecast. And it wasn't always right. Some projections never happened, but the ones that did shared a disturbing detail. In every verified future frame, Earth was always slightly dimmer, as if light itself faded with each prediction fulfilled. The team called it the shadow forecast. Within hours, governments took notice. Classified briefings spread. Quiet lockdowns were issued to observatories. Satellites rerouted. Analysts sworn into silence. But the data kept flowing, and with it, new details. Distant objects in motion that defied Newtonian mechanics, orbiting our planet in decaying spirals not predicted by any space agency. Then came the object. It wasn't large, no bigger than a drone, but it was unmistakable, visible in multiple frames across different future projections. It was descending, slowly, gracefully, as though it had always known exactly where it needed to be. On the 12th day, the Einstein clock captured something it shouldn't have been able to. A human figure, floating in the satellite's blind zone, outside its own observational array. The image was grainy, riddled with signal noise, but the outline was unmistakable. An astronaut, suit intact, arms folded, head turned toward the camera. He was watching. Telemetry logs showed no nearby spacecraft, no scheduled missions, and the Einstein array had no external maintenance crew. Yet the suit bore the mission patch from the original deployment team. The same team who were all accounted for, all grounded. The orbital angle shifted. The astronaut drifted slightly, revealing something behind him. A metallic plate, carved into it, barely legible, were characters in a looping, spiral script. No known language, but as image analysts studied the shape of the symbols, a realization dawned. They weren't letters. They were star maps, constellations arranged in impossible configurations. Some from Earth's past, some never recorded, and some clearly in motion. Stars that weren't where they belonged, stitched into sequences that told no story, yet hummed with intent. When the image's exposure was increased, hidden beneath the brightest star cluster, a second outline came into view. A vessel, not one built by human hands, not a capsule or shuttle. It looked grown layered, like bone, or coral, or time calcified into structure. And it wasn't in orbit. It was hovering just beyond the Einstein array's field of resolution. But each new transmission pulled it closer, pixel by pixel. A fractal object, always out of focus, always almost here. In the control room, silence fell. The last prediction arrived. An image of Earth. A still ocean, a black sky, and above it, no moon, no clouds. Just the Einstein clock, floating, alone, its digital face finally ticking again. Backward, and beneath it, reflected in the mirrored ocean, a second Earth. Inverted, motionless, waiting. The mirrored Earth hung like a phantom beneath the real one, suspended in reflection, yet untouched by gravity. No ripples, no atmosphere, no movement. Just a glassy imitation rendered across space-time. The image flickered for 6 seconds, then went dark. Not a fade, a complete blackout. The Einstein array ceased all output. Telemetry flatlined. Not even the satellite's basic ping returned. And then a pulse. Not from the clock. Not from space. From Earth. It wasn't electromagnetic, nor seismic. It moved through infrastructure, triggering motion sensors in data centers, flipping standby lights in observatories, waking inert devices not connected to any network. Across the globe, clocks began blinking, not spinning, not resetting, just blinking, frozen on the same unreadable time. 88:88. It lasted exactly 10 minutes. When the Einstein array's signal resumed, the first frame it transmitted was not of Earth, but of a control room. The same room that had appeared in the earlier anomaly. But this time, it wasn't empty. There were 7 figures, all motionless, all facing away from the camera, all staring at something unseen beyond the frame. One of them wore a patch that hadn't yet been designed, an emblem shaped like a Mobius strip, wrapped in coordinates that pointed not to Earth, but to the Sagittarius A** black hole. Another figure held a clipboard bearing a checklist. At the top, final synchronization complete. The clock on the wall ticked once, then reversed. Back in mission control, no one spoke. The room had filled with a kind of stillness that didn't feel human. The oxygen hiss felt louder. Screens hummed too cleanly. Everything in the room felt arranged, as if rehearsed, and one by one, the technicians began reporting the same thing. They were no longer sure how long they'd been sitting there. Had it been minutes? Hours? Days? One technician, scanning previous feed logs, found something worse. The room they were sitting in, their control room, had already been seen. It was visible in one of the Einstein array's transmitted stills. Same papers, same spilled coffee, same cracks in the floor tile. Only in the image, the room was abandoned, cobwebbed, the monitors were dark, and where the technician now sat, there was only an empty chair. Except one thing differed. On the wall, behind that empty chair, someone had scrawled a message in red grease pencil. The letters were warped, drawn by a shaky hand, but legible. "It's already watching. Stop looking." The image vanished from the log seconds after it was found, replaced with static. From that moment on, every time the Einstein clock ticked, backward or forward, Earth's magnetic field wobbled. Just slightly. Just enough to make birds shift direction mid-flight. Just enough to make digital compasses point inward, toward the planet's core, as though something was drawing them in. One final transmission came through. Not an image, not a signal, a time code. Precise, long, unlike any calendar format. Years, months, days, seconds. Values too large to fit in current software. When decoded by temporal physicists, the result wasn't a moment in the future. It was a moment in the past, roughly 13.8 billion years ago. The estimated time of the Big Bang. Only the clock didn't mark it as a beginning. It labeled it checkpoint 0. Since then, the Einstein array has continued to tick, transmitting frames Earth has not yet reached. No humans appear in them. No animals. Only structures, cyclopean, vast, organic, rising along the continents in slow motion. Buildings that look less like cities and more like neural patterns, spreading across the planet like thought itself. At the edge of every frame is the same vessel, growing clearer, less abstract, no longer fractal. It looks like it's breathing. The clock continues. And somewhere, in orbit above the blackened rift, the mirrored astronaut remains. Still deploying, still watching, still counting backward, until we reach 0 again.